Welcome to Perspectives Online and on air from WFSU Public Media. I'm Tom Flanigan. This program recorded on Tuesday, August 25th for playback both on WFSU FM and the WFSU Public Media Facebook page on Thursday, August 27th. A little story to start you off here. Back in, May of 2012, I think it was, then Florida State President Eric Barron announced the school had just hired a new vice president of research, a guy named Gary Ostrander. And in the intervening 8 years, Dr. Ostrander has expanded and enhanced, which was already just a formidable research institution, but is now a $250 million juggernaut. And today, the school is pushing the exploratory envelopes in many disciplines, including medicine and physics and a host of other sciences and just all over the place. So we wanted to kind of get together with Dr. Ostrander and get an update as to how particularly the current COVID situation is changing the landscape of research at Florida State and its multiple partners, and where we are, where we might go from there. And he joins us right now for the whole hour. Dr. Gary Ostrander, so good to see you, sir. How are you hanging in?
I'm doing okay. Good to see you too, Tom. Good morning, and looking forward to talking a little bit this morning.
Let's get the newsy stuff right up front here. This came out of the university just a couple of weeks ago, a major partnership and collaboration between the university and Tallahassee Memorial Hospital related to the COVID pandemic. Tell us what's the situation there. What is that partnership?
Thanks, Tom. This is pretty exciting. So first of all, set the stage. Florida State University and Tallahassee Memorial Healthcare have worked together in a variety of different ways for many, many years. The obvious partnerships you're aware of with the medical school, but folks in music, art therapy, nursing, arts and sciences, they partner with folks at TMH on various types of clinical studies, some revolving around specific healthcare, other revolving around medical devices, and some are just basic research studies. So we've got a long and productive relationship with TMH. And basically what happened, Tom, is one of my faculty members, Jonathan Dennis, professor in the Department of Biology, got to thinking a lot about this COVID testing. And in parallel, we at the university and administration were starting to think about what it would be like to have 40-some thousand students come back on campus and have a variety of faculty and staff, and how you function in that type of an environment, particularly when we became aware that most of the COVID testing early on was going outside of Tallahassee. It was going outside of Leon County. It was going sometimes out of state. And, for the third largest state in the country and the capital city, it didn't really seem quite right. Didn't seem like it should have to be that way. And variety of folks got together, started thinking this through, looking at possibilities. And early on, the objective, and Dr. Jonathan Dennis had pointed out, is that we really need to have a quick turnaround time and we need to be really accurate. And with that mantra in mind, we came up with a plan. And the idea would be to be able to test our faculty, our staff, our students, and to have a quick 24-hour turnaround time in testing. So this involves setting up a clinical laboratory that's maybe a little different than other clinical laboratories. And we're not going to go into all the details here, but Jonathan had some ideas on the actual running of the testing itself that could accelerate things and also deal with what are becoming significant supply chain issues. So in terms of where we go, we thought we maybe could set this up ourselves. We thought we could partner maybe with a big reference lab. We obviously were talking to TMH. And in the end, it became clear that the best approach would be to partner with our colleagues at TMH. TMH has, for obvious reasons, clinical laboratories, though they've never done this particular type of assay and certainly don't have a laboratory equipped for doing this the way we're doing it. But they bring a lot of expertise to the table. They have what's called a CLIA certification. That's a certification you're required to have to be able to do these testing on humans. They certainly have the back office experience, if I could put it that way, because you have to deal with insurance companies and billing and all of those types of issues, coding samples, security issues. FSU, on the other hand, we have the expertise in the testing itself and the technology. What we're focused on is a PCR-based test. I think most people by now know that there's antibody tests out there, and they tell you if you're exposed, and it's based on the fact that your body has mounted an immune response. And there's antigen tests, which is another approach using antibodies to look and see if antigens, proteins from the virus are available, particularly around this the spike protein people hear about in the virus. But the gold standard continues to be the ability to identify the virus itself, actually identify the RNA in the virus. Humans have DNA, viruses have RNA, essentially functions the same way. So we also knew then that we would have the ability, if resources became limited, supply chain issues, that we understand how these assays work and what could and couldn't be substituted and how things could be done differently. So we launched off on this. We built a facility in probably less than 2 weeks in Innovation Park. LCDRA was really helpful in getting some space in a hurry. And it was one of these scenarios, Tom, where we were doing demolition on a Monday, ripping up a floor and putting down a tile floor on a Tuesday, sealing the floor on Wednesday, doing electrical, and doing computer drops by the end of the week. And so we took what was a pretty significant amount of office space and converted it into a laboratory and made it all secure, put everything in place we needed out there. And then we've slowly began to assemble the lab, put it together, test out all of our processes, how to do the testing. And along about August 3rd, we had a soft opening. Actually, we soft opened a little earlier than that. Sorry, I'm going to keep going here. There's a lot to tell, fill in the story, but please stop me if you have any questions. Then we partnered with our College of Medicine, and we set up a plan for being able to test and be able to test up to 1,000 people a day and run them through the lab. So Dr. Zedeker and Drs. Van Dormy at the College of Medicine have been incredibly helpful in setting up the ability for us to collect a lot of samples in a short period of time, route those over to the lab. We have courier services in place. And last Friday, I think we ran 600 plus samples through in the day and reported back the results in less than 24 hours. And oftentimes we're reporting results back in less than 8 hours. So let me stop there and see what questions you might have, lest I tie up all of our time.
Well, a formidable accomplishment for sure. But if you have a capability of 1,000 subjects to be tested per day, and you got an excess of 40,000 students and an excess of a couple thousand faculty and staff that you also have to run through, that's, you would have a cycle of more than a month to get to everybody. And the way that things are evolving here with the virus, you may have to test people multiple times, even over the course of, a 6-month period. So do you have to expand capability even more to be able to do that? Or are you kind of comfortable with where it is now?
Yeah, that's a really astute question you asked, Tom. So it turns out that at the start here, people coming into the system, some people have been tested other places or tested before the students. Some of the students were tested before they came back. You're absolutely right. Our current capability is 1,056 samples a day, but that's a regular 8-hour day, and that's 5 days a week. We actually designed all of this with the knowledge that it might become necessary to go to 16-hour shifts or 24-hour shifts. And of course, we wouldn't do that to the med techs who work very hard to do this. We'd be hiring more med techs and putting more shifts in. It might become necessary to go to 7 days a week. Theoretically, if we were to go around the clock, we would be approaching 21,000 samples a week. We have no desire to do that, and at present, we don't have a need to do that, but that capability exists should we need it. I hope we're never at that point in this community that we need to do that, but FSU and TMH, I think, have always had a record of being supportive of the community and helpful to the community. If it ever came to that, we would, of course, consider going that route.
And seeing what happened here with institutions such as Notre Dame, UNC, Purdue, who bravely got things back in operation, and suddenly, as these spikes began to cut back on their operations. We hope that doesn't happen here, but some people we're talking to say, hey, it's inevitable, it's going to occur. We need to have at least that testing potentiality in order to keep a handle on that circumstance.
That's exactly right. So, the whole idea of all this testing, of course, Tom, is to be able to identify individuals that are carrying the virus who more often than not, if they're students, are going to be asymptomatic. So they're not going to have any symptoms. So we've got to get them to stop by, let us test them. And if they are asymptomatic, we need to isolate them. And again, the students hopefully appreciate that while they're at very, very low risk of having any long-term deleterious effects, the folks around them, the folks who work in the bookstore, the folks who work in the gym, the folks who work in the dormitories, the folks who are cleaning our building, working on the grounds, all of the faculty, all of the staff, there's just a lot of people in there that don't fall in that 18 to 22, 24-year-old age group. And unfortunately, a number of those folks have pre-existing medical conditions. So maybe they're over 60, maybe they have diabetes or heart problems or other respiratory issues that for an 18-year-old isn't even on their radar. But folks that are borderline COPD or have COPD, this would be a very, very significant illness if it were to occur. So we're working really hard to educate students and everybody in the community, encourage good behavior, but also encourage testing, and so that we can, if anybody is positive, we can get them out of the pool right away for the 10 days or so it takes to get the virus out of their system.
Beyond the testing partnership you just talked about, Dr. Ostrander, do you see that this new environment, our kind of pandemic world that we're living in here, will present new opportunities, possibilities for research institutions like Florida State University, Florida A&M, all of those to play into the solution to this, if in fact there is a long-term way to mitigate this virus?
Right. Absolutely. And I think I'm going to answer the question two ways. First of all, the research activities it's not that it's going to be entirely new research for us. The type of research we're doing is consistent with this. It may be a different virus or a different vector. And also there's going to be a lot more funding for that research. And as a result, there'll be a lot more opportunities. 5 or 6 years ago, if you were a virologist working on that particular well, we didn't know about that particular coronavirus, but if you're working on coronaviruses, there are certainly opportunities for funding through the NIH. Now there's many, many more. But the opportunities extend far beyond the virus, and I think perhaps some of your listeners and viewers might be interested in something that happened at Florida State early on with this. Florida State is, we have an office of research development, and the folks work with the faculty and the students to develop research proposals and to secure funding and training and what have you. And they have a couple of times a year an event we call a collaborative collision, where we bring in diverse group of researchers from across the campus or people from the community, put them all together for 2 or 3 hours and exchange ideas. And I won't go into the details of what happens, but it's a really fun afternoon for everybody. We typically get 50 to 100, sometimes 150 people that show up at these events. Our folks put together a collaborative collision with folks in the community as well as at the university back in, I believe it was May, and it was all virtual. It was a Zoom collaborative collision, and it lasted only 2 hours, and I was on for most of it. And I think when we started, we had about 77 people in the event, and that actually went up a little bit during the day or during a couple hours. And when it was winding down, there were still 73 involved. And out of that, we set up a grant program, a funding program. And the rules were folks that had participated in the collaborative collision needed to partner with somebody else. So maybe you had a healthcare provider in the community and a basic scientist in the med school or a nurse in the College of Nursing. And out of that, I think we generated about 60 proposals, and we ended up spending close to $500,000 to fund about 20 to 25 of those proposals. And the criteria was you had to have a study that you could get done by the end of the summer. The target was August 18th, so that you would have data in place to be able to respond to these funding opportunities, going back to where you started with your question, Tom. Funding opportunities coming from the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, Department of Education. They are just now starting to release RFAs or RFPs, as they're called, to fund that work. And I think what we're seeing is folks at Florida State University, owing to what we were able to do this summer, are well positioned and are writing proposals to secure some of that money to expand research in these areas and related to these areas.
The gold standard of all of this, though, is consistently been since the beginning, basic research that is done at our local universities, which then is taken, commercialized, monetized, and then if it can stay here, which is absolutely what you're looking for, can then become a business, a revenue producing business for the area. Talk about some of the success stories that have come out of both undergrad and graduate research programs at Florida State University, because there's been a bunch that I can think of.
There have, Tom. As we segue into that, of course, the one that's talked about most in the community is Taxol. That was the anti-cancer drug developed by Professor Holton in our chemistry department. Won't go into a lot of detail except to say that the most important aspect of that to me is that to date it saved the lives of over 1 million women. It's also generated significant revenue to Florida State University that we've been able to use and invest in other programs. But the list in the areas that our faculty are involved in research are pretty extensive. When you watch the Weather Channel and you look at these giant models for hurricanes, know that a super ensemble model, which pulls a lot of different models together, that came out of a Florida State University faculty member, and of course generated revenue for the university that we reinvest. We have folks that are developing devices, medical devices. We have folks that have been working in energy and power, material science. It's a pretty exhaustive list. Florida State University this past year was recognized as one of the universities in the world in the top 100 in generating patents. And so that's a good thing. Patents in themselves, of course, don't guarantee anything. The key is to be able to license those patents. And we've been having some pretty good success in recent years licensing. None of them have risen to the level of a Taxol yet. And that's a once in a lifetime event. But a lot of these have generated 5- and 6-figure revenues for the university. And again, it's about reinvesting. We've also, as you've noted, sometimes the technologies generate companies. Our faculty members have sometimes been able to spin up companies. More often than not, the revenues or the technology will be licensed by a company that's already established. And to be quite candid, I actually prefer that. Our faculty come in and they teach, they do research, and when you're trying to run a company, that takes a huge amount of time. So we've evolved towards a model where we really don't encourage the faculty member to try to be president, CEO, CFO, and marketing. of a small operation. We try to partner with them, with people that have that expertise. There's folks in the Tallahassee community who are retired from significant Fortune 100 businesses that have been just invaluable in helping providing their business acumen to our faculty and identifying individuals that can run the business side. As you know, at Florida State University, we've got the Jim Moran Institute, we've got the entrepreneurship program, we've got obviously College of Business. So we've got pretty good expertise that we're also partnering with as we move forward.
And if people even look at the example of Thomas Edison, great genius and creative master that he was, some of his business decisions weren't exactly the best. He could have used like some help from Jim Moran to try to get some of his stuff. He wouldn't have lost all those opportunities then to George Westinghouse and some of those other guys, Nikola Tesla, you know, who bailed on him and went on to do other things. So yeah,
Yep.
that's sometimes it doesn't work too well.
You know, you're exactly right. I've in my career, I've been fortunate enough to have been, you know, had some things patented with some colleagues and been involved in some business things over the years. And as a scientist starting out, and when I first got involved in that 25 years ago, I thought I understood how it should work, or at least I thought I knew how I thought it should work. And it isn't until you have a few failures and then you step aside and you let the people who really understand how business, marketing, and everything works and let them take control that you really are successful. You know, so many of us, and I'm going to use myself as an example, think that when you get something patented or you disclose an invention or you put it out there, that all of a sudden these big companies are going to start sending you a check every month and saying, you know, we're using your technology. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way at all. And it's many times you have great ideas and great inventions and the companies will tell you that that's the best thing out there. But in order for us to take it on board, we would have to completely change our assembly lines. And that's going to cost too many millions of dollars to do. So we're just going to buy your technology and stick it on a shelf so nobody else has it, and we're never going to use it. So it's a very complicated environment for people.
It happens. Dr. Gary Ostrander, the Vice President of Research at Florida State University, is our guest for the whole hour here on this special edition of Perspectives. And if you miss all or part of any Perspectives program, you can find it online, not only on our WFSU.org website, but also our WFSU Public Media Facebook page, which if you haven't checked it out recently, you should. It is an absolute treasure trove of great programming from our TV and our radio side and all of our different content providers. We try to have the most recent Perspective show up on both places as soon as we can during the actual airing of the program itself. So you hope that you can join us there online and watch these and listen to them over and over again. Dr. Ostrander, we have, as you have referred to it very often, one of the research crown jewels in the entire United States, actually probably the Western powers, the National High Magnetic Field Laboratory, just a few blocks away from our home at WFSU. Do you think that that's being leveraged to its fullest capability? I mean, we talked to Greg Bobinger, the director over there, and he's involved in 85,000 things simultaneously at any given day. But do you think we can market that even more than what it has been done to try to lure some more of that revenue generating business into us, as well as the research outflow?
Absolutely, and that's what we're trying to do. You know, 85,000 is maybe on the low end for the number of things going on over there. And I say that in jest, but there is just so much potential. Of course, everybody over there has a full-time job, and whether they're doing basic research or they're doing education or outreach, recognize, of course, this is a major user facility with 5,000 to 6,000 engineers and scientists from all over the world coming to Tallahassee for extended periods to run samples, to do work. There's not enough hours in the day for us to pursue every single possibility. But as you know, there is a magnetics task force. Various business leaders in the community are involved, folks from FSU, Mag Lab, of course, being part of FSU, folks from engineering. And we continue to pursue and look for other opportunities and find other ways. One of the things that we hope could come out of all of this, and we've talked about this, is when you look at the research coming out of the Mag Lab, you realize that you can look at what they're doing and you can predict pretty accurately technology that will be widely in place, say, 10 years from now. So for example, in the last few years, the MRI technology is such that where we're used to getting an MRI to look at a bone, to look at a muscle, to look at an organ, folks in the Mag Lab have worked with others to be able to demonstrate that they can go to the molecular level. So you could look at a tumor and you could look at signals of various elements, say calcium, and be able to tell whether that tumor is dying or not following presentation of a chemotherapeutic agent. So the idea there is it's been demonstrated, proof of principle has been demonstrated that if you were given an anti-cancer drug, you could find out in theory within a couple of days if it's working, as opposed to much longer time frames with much more difficult imaging. I think it's reasonable to expect that in 10, 15 years, that is going to be standard technology when you go to a hospital. The resolution of your MRI is going to get better and better. I think, Tom, you and I are young enough to remember when MRI wasn't a big deal and you were only getting x-rays. And so it only stands to reason that this essentially molecular MRI is going to really explode. To that end, it makes sense to us that maybe a General Electric, some of the other companies, Siemens, that are on the front edge and that are producing these MRI machines for the world, might want to think about co-locating around Florida State University and around the Mag Lab. They don't have to build a giant building or a giant facility. We can help them identify space or space and innovation park, have a few engineers out here, develop some collaborations, and whether they be with the Mag Lab, whether they be with the College of Engineering, a number of the other specialized research centers. We've got a lot going on in aerospace with FCAP. We've got a lot going on in power with the Center for Advanced Power Systems. So that's the model that a number of us have been trying to push and trying to work on, and got some people, with pretty good sized Rolodexes trying to identify folks that could come out. And we've had visitors. We've, gotten to the point that companies have come, they have looked. Obviously, things have slowed down a bit with COVID, but that's the vision. And that would grow Innovation Park, and that would bring more jobs to Tallahassee. And it's a win-win for everybody.
Taking advantage, I guess, of a trend that has been going on for quite a while is, I think most of my colleagues at WFSU will attest, I love old documentaries from all the way back into the 1920s, and thank God for YouTube. It is such a wonderful resource. But I found a promotional, it's propaganda for sure, but a promotional piece from General Electric in black and white that dated probably from just before World War II. And it made a big deal of the world-class research facilities that were owned and operated by General Electric from sea to shining sea. And it visited each one of these, whether it was in New Jersey or Oklahoma or Pittsburgh or some of these other places. But many of these large companies now are contracting out their research, are they not, to organizations such as Florida State University, because they really don't want to have the investment, the expense of running those laboratories. Let you guys do it, and do it on a contract basis.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Tom. So to expand a little bit on what you've articulated, is there was a period of time when a lot of research that was obviously going to be focused on product development was handled in-house by these large companies. But what happened is, as technology really expanded, certainly during our lives, we went from tubes in our TVs to, solid state electronics. And you began to develop instrumentation such as we have at the Mag Lab, the wind tunnel we have, a lot of our own power station in one of our facilities. It became cost prohibitive, even for companies like GE, to have that type of capability. The advances in instrumentation in the last 3-4 decades have just been amazing in all areas. At the same time, I think in the United States, as well as in other places of the world, but certainly the United States has been recognized as a leader, came the recognition that research really does well in a university environment. It's transparent, it's open. It made sense for the government to push the money into research universities as opposed to private companies to push research forward. So what you now have is a situation where if you're a company, you may need access to 4 or 5 different types of equipment, very, very different types of machinery that would say, maybe you have to partner with Florida State University and get access to our MRI in the medical school. And maybe you have to partner with another institution to have very sophisticated gene sequencing. And that's just the direction it's going. And that's good. We're going to see more and more of that. And I think it's also good. It's good for science. It's going to move it along much quicker.
And do you have the capability, again, with the fact that faculty still, they got to do their research, of course, but they also got to teach.
Right.
Do you have the capability of taking on more and more of that kind of business as we move ahead?
Yeah, absolutely we do, because one of the things we have and that we do now already is that when faculty members obtain research grants, typically the grant may cover a month or 2 or 3 months of their summer salary. It will fund the graduate students who will do a lot of the work, the hands-on portion of the work, but it can also fund other PhD level cutting edge researchers, folks early in their career like postdocs or folks more senior. So what ends up happening is in a facility like the Mag Lab, for example, you'll have a significant number of faculty, 8, 10, 12, but they may have research grants that are responsible for the salaries and the funding of another 40, 50, 60 people on specific research projects. And the same thing is true on the main campus, as we're seeing more and more of that as we grow the research portfolio. It brings in more good jobs in the community. And one thing I always like to point out, Tom, and I know you know it, but I'm going to sneak this in here, and that is when we talk about how much money the university brings in, any of the universities, folks should immediately recognize that majority of that money is going to circulate in our community, because most of that money is paying salaries, and those salaries are going to people who are paying rent, who are going to our restaurants, going to our movie theaters, going, churches, wherever. That money is circulating in Tallahassee that's coming in from the federal government. So when we bring in, $200 million, say, just from the federal government in grants and contracts in a year, that's all coming from Washington, D.C., back into Tallahassee. That's taxpayers' money from all over the country, and it's all flowing in here. That's pretty significant.
And it can also help, not to put a political point on it, to perhaps compensate for what is likely to be a decrease in support from the Florida legislature. We are looking at a revenue crunch right now. We just saw that last week, that we're down a bunch of millions of dollars so far, and some of that certainly would remand to places like Florida State University. So it may help to make up at least a little bit of that.
Right. Well, that's true, Tom. We've been pretty fortunate at Florida State. Our faculty the last 5-6 years have just been doing this incredible job. And most years recently, I've been able to report out our numbers that are a record for us, breaking a prior year's record. And that, you're absolutely right. That is very helpful as they generate more grants and bring in more dollars. It can certainly offset other places. We're also looking to diversify our funding stream as well. So not just worrying about federal grants, we're putting more energy into looking at private foundations. There's a lot of wealth in those private foundations. There's also looking at individuals that have considerable wealth and want to have an impact. And we're seeing more of that. And so we're working hard to bring that in and creating a shared vision between what researchers at Florida State University are doing and what these private foundations or individuals wish to do with their wealth, and see if we can partner with them in it.
Circling back around to the COVID situation, it looks like many of us now are kind of taking a page from the researchers' book of operation, because you can have someone at CERT in Switzerland, you can have someone else at a major institution in San Diego, California, someone in Tallahassee. They can be all over the place. They are using electronic platforms to interface, to share ideas and data and all that kind of thing. Now we're all having to do it. So do you see that COVID really is not going to have that much impact perhaps on some of the research capability of Florida State and other schools? Or over the long haul, you still got to get into those laboratories and use that highfalutin equipment if you want to get a lot of this stuff done?
Right. So good question. And I think the way I'll answer it is to tell you what I saw over the last 4 or 5 months. So as you know, we pretty much shut down the university completely very early on. And what happened is, and the community to a large extent was shut down. Folks weren't able to travel. And so folks were pretty much sitting in front of a computer in their home office, their bedroom, what have you. For those of our faculty that are in disciplines that don't require a laboratory or don't require out in a field sampling or, taking measurements off a jet engine or collecting invertebrates on the bottom of a coral reef, I think they found more time to actually work, and I think the productivity level was very good. And they're of course producing research as well, social sciences, humanities, even some of the arts were able to perhaps get a little bit more work done under those conditions. As the university opened back up, we were able to get people back into the laboratories. Our faculty, we kept the density down, but our faculty and staff were very passionate and are very creative and are anxious to get back in the lab. So we did a lot more staggering. So as it is now or was before, you could go by the university in the evenings and weekends and see lights on. I think you saw more people in the evenings now and more people on the weekends to balance it out, as we kept the density pretty low to encourage the social distancing. But at the end of the day, for those folks who need to be out in the field sampling, or for those folks that need to travel to other research laboratories or need to travel to Florida State to do their work, that's a bit of an impediment. That's going to slow things down. We're hopeful that when we look back on this, maybe 2 years from now, and we're all vaccinated and everybody's doing well, that what we'll see is that the impacts on the actual research were minimal, and perhaps they were mitigated by the fact that a lot more proposals were written, a lot more manuscripts were written, a lot more book chapters were finished. So many times I talked to faculty, from my home office who were sitting in their home office and said, what are you doing? And they said, well, can't go out in the boat, but we're working on 4 different papers. And at the end of the day, that's really what's important to the faculty. We like to talk about the money and what it does for our economy, but the research doesn't count unless you publish it in a peer-reviewed journal. And so there's a part of me that's happy that the faculty and many of my colleagues got this big block of time to get a lot of papers written and get a lot of proposals out the door.
Regardless of what happens with the vaccine, which we all wishing and hoping and thinking and praying are just so desirous to have operative and to get so much of this behind us. A little crystal ball here, if you would, Gary. How do you see some of the trends in research evolving, at least in the immediate term? We can't look maybe 20, 30 years down the road, but how do you see this playing out at Florida State over the next couple 5 years?
Well, the first thing, the most obvious thing that I think everybody's come to realize is that this Zoom format, well, it has its limits and it does create significant eye strain for many of us. You can get a lot of work done in this format. You can do a lot and you can work with people in other parts of the world. And it's fairly clear when I think about some of the things that I'm doing and others talking to them that Zoom, or whatever Zoom is replaced by, is going to be a significant part of how we do research and actually how the whole university functions going forward. And well, we'll have less Zoom meetings and it'll decrease. We're going to continue to do this. It's going to be an important part of it for long term. It also is probably going to mean less travel. The realization that you can get certain things done and you can be fairly effective in these formats. And even the Zoom is evolving, and the ability to show videos, and it's gotten easier and easier to share screens and to work in that format. And I think the folks in application development are expanding that. So we'll see a lot more of that. I think this is also contributing to the whole idea of collaborative research, and folks, this is enhancing collaborative research. And frankly, for a lot of us, the most interesting research is the research that's at the boundaries of the traditional disciplines. And so I hope we'll continue to see more emphasis put on that type of research, where we can potentially make some unique contributions going forward. But it will be a different world, Tom.
I can see the social scientists and the philosophers and some of the other folks going, yes, but it moves us closer to the hive. Maybe this is not such a good thing.
Well, it's a good point, Tom, because it was interesting. I talked earlier about our collaborative collision and all the proposals that came out. And I know folks would expect to hear the ones about virus and COVID and disease and all that. But as a result of this, there's a lot of thinking by our faculty in education and other disciplines about, what is the real impact of looking at a screen all day, and what is the impact on concentration, and how do you actually learn from this kind of an environment? And so there's a lot of other aspects of this that need to be thought through. But that's what we have, pretty diverse group of faculty at FSU doing research. And I think you're going to, as you've seen over the years, our work ends up being talked about on the national news and the New York Times and what have you. And I think some of the neat studies that are going on right now, case in point, we've got a faculty member that back in March was talking about, what do you do when you have a COVID and a pandemic and you have a hurricane at the same time? How do you deal with those issues? And I think it's fair to say that we have gotten people thinking about that, and they, in their research, got people thinking about that in Florida, perhaps much earlier than they would have, and in more depth than they would have when that idea was first surfaced coming out of one of our workshops. So we hope we don't have to use that. Our friends and families in Texas and Louisiana are probably going to become the test side of that in the next 48 hours. But we're going to do the best we can.
And as catastrophic as this entire situation seems, and all the negatives that are connected with it, it seems to be historically, it's times like this, World War II being a great example, that pushes those envelopes forward much more quickly than otherwise they might. And so there might be some other positives that come out of all this too.
Oh, you are absolutely right. And we say it lightheartedly, is you never want to waste a crisis. And this is really a perfect example of that, some of the things that are coming out of it. And, when the books are written about this, 2-3 years out from now, it's really going to be amazing what things have changed permanently as a result.
We have a couple things that are going on, though, that you can see while construction may have ground to a halt in many other parts of the world. Still got a new student union that is a building down there at Woodward and Tennessee, and right kitty corner from it, that was a new classroom and research facility that is going up. I think you still got plans, don't you, to do something in the so-called Southwest campus right there between WFSU and Innovation Park.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So the two buildings on campus, just to fill that in, as before I shift over to Innovation Park, Ocean Earth Sciences Technology, that is up and running. It's a beautiful building, incredible facilities in there. It's used for teaching and for research both. And it was a long time coming. It took about 7 years to get all the funding in place from the ledge, and it's open and it's working just great. The student union is moving along really well too. It's not anything that I'm involved in, but it's been pretty exciting to see the graphic video representations of what it's all going to have and what it's going to look like, and that's going to be just a wonderful addition to the campus. Out of the Southwest campus, we've done a few things. You know, we've done some renovations on a couple of the buildings over the last 2 years. Two of the larger 4-story buildings that look to be primarily office buildings. Folks might be pleased to know that those buildings now have a significant presence of biomedical researchers, behavioral health sciences, folks that are working on a variety of things related to behavioral health, and a lot of NIH funding in those 2 buildings now, a lot of activity. And that was deliberate, Tom. You know, we saw that space was becoming limited in the medical school and nursing, social work. And so the idea was to co-locate a lot of the big centers, a lot of the big projects in one area so that people would be bumping into each other that are in related but not the same disciplines. And that's been working out really well. We have our Center for Advanced Power Systems, where we've significantly expanded the back of that. The College of Engineering, with some significant hiring the last 2 years, and no less than 6 faculty have gone into that area. And a number of them have been incredibly productive in terms of generating grants. We also landed a pretty outstanding faculty member from Michigan that's moved into that facility in that space. So we're expanding there. But on that big corner out there that's open, we've had a plan to put in a building, interdisciplinary research and commercialization. And that's going to be a net of about 120,000 square feet. We're basically shovel ready now. We've spent about $4 or $5 million to completely program it and basically get to the point that we have, in the old nomenclature, the blueprint's ready to go. You know, we know where all the outlets are and the switch plates and the water faucets, and everything is ready. The legislature has been very generous and supportive. As you know, there hasn't been a lot of money on the part of the ledge for new buildings, but thus far they've put up around $20 million towards this project. The Research Foundation at FSU has wisely invested a lot of that Taxol money. And so we're going to put up about 45 million towards that building. And then we're waiting for the last little bit from the legislature. The building's going to be really interesting because the idea there, much like I just articulated for the behavioral health sciences across the street, is to pull together groups in the physical sciences, engineering, biomedical, and to let them have essentially a sandbox. It's going to be instrumentation heavy to work on new cutting edge technologies that exist between the disciplines. But there's another piece to it that's pretty interesting, is that we're going to have some space that an engineer, say from Boeing, wants to come and spend 6 months and work with folks across the street in our Center for Aeronautics, working with FCAP. Someone wants to work in High Performance Materials Institute, HPMI. So maybe somebody wants to come out from one of the California companies. We're going to have a place for them where they could have some lab space, they can have offices, and they can collaborate. So that's where this interdisciplinary commercialization part comes in. That's going to be very important. We already collaborate with folks like Danfoss Turbocore and others. They have their developmental facilities out there. They've seen the value of expanding because there is a mag lab, because there is a College of Engineering, because of all these other things. And so we're going to have a building that's going to make it easier for you if you're Hewlett Packard, if you're Amazon, well, Amazon's not a good example. Any of the big tech companies that are looking, maybe Amazon will come out and want to work on drones. I don't know. We'll see. But any of those companies that are doing big technologies, this will be a place that you could come, have some space, but be in proximity of literally world-class facilities. So that's
exciting stuff. Yeah, very exciting stuff for Florida State. And I understand that cutting edge fuel cell research is still going on between the Mag Lab and I think the folks out in Los Alamos. They're still playing around with that could revolutionize what happens when you have solar power in the day and then it goes away at night. Why not stockpile what you had in excess during the day and then it goes out in the evening when the sun isn't shining?
Exactly. You know, that's a lot of the keys of research around what they call natural is the wind may only blow at certain times, the sun may only be out at certain times. You really need to be able to capture it and store it. And so it's really a storage question. And what we're seeing now from various research groups at Florida State University and around the world is working on better and better storage technologies, better batteries, lighter batteries, even plastic batteries haven't been invented. So that certainly is going to be a wave of the future, and FSU is a part of it.
It is good that we end on an energetic note, Gary Ostrander, because you've certainly brought a lot of energy to the research initiatives at Florida State University, and hope you stick around for a good long time. Thank you for the update and for sharing all this terrific information with us today on Perspectives, Gary.
You're very welcome, Tom. Thank you, and stay safe.
You too, sir. Perspectives produced by WFSU Public Media in Tallahassee. Thanks going out to Taylor Cox, Paul Dam, Amy Diaz de Villegas, Tricia Moynihan, and Lydell Rawls, our Zoom facilitator and executive producer, Kim Kelling. I'm Tom Flanigan. You know, the pandemic has greatly exacerbated mental health issues. And on our next Perspectives, we're going to be talking about how that phenomenon is impacting us locally, and we will also discover the multitude of resources that are also available in our area to address the matter and help people heal and deal. That's coming up on our next Perspectives. Be safe.